Hey everybody, how are you doing today? We're like day 3 of Treefort, day 2 of Hackfort. Snowfort is definitely hashtag Snowfort 2023 this year. But things could look up. Definitely need to be bundled up by main stage. But anyways, guys, my name's Sean Wakely. If you don't know me, I'm the director of Hackfort. I am just so stoked about Treefort this year. It's been different. If you haven't been to main stage, it's really, really cool. We also have the new Treefort Music Hall. Highly recommend you check out a show there. It's a really special place, and a lot of people put a lot of work and time into that. I am so honored to have Scotty out. He and I met Scotty. If you guys know Linus Media Group, I went to their event, LTX up in Vancouver, and Scotty was there, and I just happened to introduce myself, and we had this great talk, and we've been in touch for a while. And Scotty, of course, has spent a lot of his time in China, and we kept in contact, though. It was always a goal of mine to get him out, because I feel like he really does embody a lot of the things we're trying to do here at Hackfort. And Scotty, I'm just so stoked to have you here. I'll turn it over. I do have someone to help out when we have time for Q&A. We'll pass around a microphone, and because this is being recorded, so we're going to try to get all those questions. Thanks, Scotty.
Thank you all. Thanks, Sean, for having me and for the nice introduction. I'm honored to be here. I'm Scotty Allen, and I'm an engineer and hacker, but I make my living telling stories. I want to convince you to start telling stories. Or if you're already telling stories, I want to give you some ideas on how to improve your storytelling using the engineering skills you already have. I run a YouTube channel called Strange Parts, which is about understanding how and where the technology in our lives comes from as a path to subverting it and making it our own. So it's kind of adventure meets travel meets technology. A lot of the videos that I make are about either manufacturing or about ambitious electronics projects subverting common household electronics that you may have in your pockets right now. The channel has around 2 million, a little bit under 2 million subscribers, and the videos have gotten over 135 million views. I got my start building my own iPhone from parts that I bought in the Chinese cell phone markets. I then went on to add the headphone jack back to the iPhone after Apple removed it. And I've visited countless factories to see how things are made. This is inside the kind of core workings of an aftermarket iPhone battery factory in China. I've also been to tons of industrial markets, including the Yiwu, the largest wholesale consumer goods market in the world. It's 7 kilometers long, and it's a series of connected buildings. You can walk 7 kilometers from end to end. And I've done all this to make videos. But I haven't always made videos or been in front of an audience. Previously, I was a software engineer. And believe it or not, I started my career as a full-time YouTube creator somewhat by accident. 10 years ago, I went to China with the goal of starting an electronics company. And when I got to Shenzhen, which is currently the electronics manufacturing hub of the world, I was so amazed that I was just dying to share all of this with my hacker friends back home in San Francisco. And so I started making little videos of all the amazing things I was seeing. This is a woman cleaning an escalator coming out of the subway. And I realized that there were these amazing stories all around me that just weren't being told. These folks are making control boards for hoverboards. This is in about 2016, maybe, and at the height of the hoverboard craze. Whoop. And I figured that maybe if I started telling some of these stories, maybe I could build a small audience to market my electronics to. And then I stumbled upon a great idea. Someone visiting from out of town said, I was walking through the cell phone markets today, and I think there might be enough parts there to build your own phone. And I thought, that's a really great idea. Because I was part of an open source group of hackers making open source electronics. We would go to Chinese barbecue every night on the street in Shenzhen and drink beer. And I was just learning a ton from these folks. But there was one area of the electronics markets a few blocks away that we didn't understand, and that was the cell phone markets. There were all these parts, but we didn't really understand how the markets worked. It was really opaque. And this woman went back home, and I didn't hear anything more about this idea of building a cell phone. And 9 months later, I was sitting talking to a reporter from Popular Mechanics, of all things, and I pitched him this idea. And we were at the same barbecue place, and I said to him, hey, if I tried to do this, if I tried to make my own phone and I made a video about it, would this be interesting to your audience? And he said, yes, absolutely. If you try this and succeed, let me know, and we'll absolutely write an article about it. And so that was just enough to give me the confidence to dive in and give this a try. So this is a back alley where they're selling used iPhone shells, phone shells. 5 months later, I had successfully built an iPhone 6S from individual parts that I bought in the market, and I had created a 23.5-minute video that I'd edited together telling the story of this journey. And that video was the first video I published on my YouTube channel, Strange Parts, and it's gotten over 25 million views. I had accidentally become a full-time YouTube creator, and I've been doing it ever since. So today, I want to teach you what I've learned the hard way over the past 5 or 6 years about how to tell stories via video using the engineering and hacking and making skills that you already have. But first, why should you tell stories? We as humans love stories. We love hearing stories. We love telling stories. Telling stories is incredibly powerful and high leverage. But why should you tell stories? Show of hands, how many people have read an article about something technical that got the fundamental idea wrong? Okay, pretty much everybody. You can do it better. You know more than quote unquote professional storytellers, journalists, writers, whatever you want to call them. You know the details. You understand the things that you're an expert in, you know far better than they do. They're kind of a jack of all trades. They're good at creating content. They don't have the depth of knowledge that you do. In addition, the world has changed since the profession of journalist or writer was created. You don't need to be employed by CNN or New York Times or have a book deal to get your story out there. There's tons of great platforms to reach huge numbers of people. And you already own the tools. They're in your pocket right now. Telling stories opens, for me, has opened tremendous doors and opportunities. You get to do really cool stuff. This is me inside a multi-$100,000 metal cutting laser that can cut metal an inch thick. You also get to meet really cool people. This is my production team for a tour of a PCB factory in China, JLC PCB. And as much as I'm uncomfortable saying it, in the US, it can also get you healthcare for free. I had a really bad concussion on a shoot in Texas about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And this is me getting loaded into a functional MRI, which was entirely paid for by the video that I created about my experience, my journey recovering. You also can make money doing this. And making videos and being a creator and telling stories can be either become a side income to fuel your passions or your full-time job if you're serious enough and willing to put in the effort. At the very least, it can pay for all of the materials that go into your projects. So why video? I think video right now is the best way to reach the most people and to build an audience. YouTube has 2.6 billion monthly active users. 1 billion hours of video are watched on the platform a day. But there's 500 hours of video uploaded every minute to YouTube. So you have to tell good stories to stand out. And I want to tell you, I want to help you with that by telling you as much of what I learned in the past 5 years about doing this well as I have time for today. So the last reason I would say that you should tell stories and tell stories via video is a bit more personal. In the course of learning to make video, it made me a lot more comfortable with who I am. I was very much a geek growing up. I was bullied in school. I wasn't particularly comfortable in my skin. And the process of being on camera and getting comfortable with that, as well as watching just hours and hours and hours of footage of myself back editing, made me a lot more comfortable with who I am and what makes me unique. And all of the things that I was bullied for when I was younger were all of a sudden things that were being celebrated in the videos that I was making. And so it really helped me kind of integrate with who I am. Downsides of video, you got to learn new skills. It's hard work. This is the hardest job I've ever had. I've worked as an engineer at Google and a bunch of other Silicon Valley startups. I've never worked harder than I work as a creator. But it's not expensive, or it doesn't have to be. So let's talk about how to make a video. I will give a warning, which is that this is not going to be a technical talk. I'm not going to talk about how to run a camera, how to do lighting, editing software, any of that, because I think there's already enough information out there that's easy to access and great. That's not the thing that I was lacking when I went to make videos. What I was lacking was, how do I do the storytelling part? So let's start with ideas. And I think some people struggle with this. I was only really interested in starting to make videos once I had seen all of these amazing stories that I wanted to tell. But if you're in the camp of, I want to make video, I want to tell stories, what should I make stories about? The first question I always ask is, what story can you tell better than anyone else on the planet can? Or that only a few people like you can? What do you know the most about? What experiences have you had in your lives? And then out of those things, what story are you really excited to tell? What really gets you jazzed up to share with other people? And then out of those ideas, what story will resonate with other people that are like you? A lot of people who are new to making video, trying to build an audience for themselves online, ask the question, I have these videos that I've made, how do I get more views? And I understand why people ask this question, but I think it's really the wrong question to be asking. I think the right question is, what video can I make that will get lots of views, right? So you have to put yourself a little bit inside the mind of your audience. The way I think about this is, I try and make stories that my coolest hacker friends, coolest engineer friends that I look up to, who do the most amazing projects, I try and make videos that they'll like and they think will be cool. But then I try and bring everybody else along with me. I try and explain it in the way such that my next door neighbor, David, who is a kitchen remodeler, who's really into technology, but he's not an engineer, right? I try and explain it in a way that he'll understand it and he'll think it's cool, right? So I try and bring him up to the level of all my really elite hacker friends. Let's talk a little bit about types of stories. So I want to make it clear that I'm using the word story to include a lot of different things. So everything from tutorials, how to do something, demonstrations, I did a thing, let me show you what I did, explaining a concept, sort of more educational videos. I do a lot of videos where I visit a place, go to a factory, go to a market, that kind of thing. And then the last type is what I'm going to call a journey, right? And I don't mean necessarily a physical journey, though I've done a lot of that. I mean a journey more like the hero's journey. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. A story that kind of takes place over time, that takes you on a journey into something, into the depths of something. So before I do that, I want to make a bold claim. You should never build something that's not in service of your story. And when I say build something, I'm specifically talking about you should never build a physical thing that's not in service of a story. I think a lot of people, how many people would consider themselves like a maker or a hacker or an engineer in the audience? Okay, about half. I think as someone who identifies as a hacker and a maker and an engineer, I get really excited about building the thing. And what I realized is that it's way more powerful if I choose to only work on projects where I think there's also a cool story attached. It's way higher leverage. I have way more ideas for projects than I would ever have time to build. So it's one of the filters that I use for what should I build is this going to make a cool story either along the way or at the end? The side effect of this is, one, I'm inherently building stuff that's worth sharing. And two, it's a lot more fun. And the reason it's more fun is because the end result is not the product. It's not the thing that I made. It's the story. And so I don't necessarily have to make something that's like fully productionized and I can make, a gazillion of that's perfect. I can make something that's a prototype. But if the story of getting there, if the journey that I went on to get there is interesting, then I win. Then I have something cool. So let's talk about the actual storytelling. You don't need to be a quote unquote creative type to tell stories, right? I think we get trapped as, well, I'm an engineer, I'm not a creative type, so I can't tell stories. And I think this is a really limiting idea. Stories follow patterns, and as engineers and hackers and makers, we're used to the idea of patterns, right? We're used to the idea of software patterns. We're used to the idea of manufacturing techniques or making techniques, right? Stories are the same way. And there are known patterns out there that you can follow to tell really great stories. You don't have to figure this out all on your own. So I'm going to give you 3 patterns. There are lots more. Let's start with the hero's journey. Show of hands, how many people have heard of the hero's journey? Okay, good. Awesome. Most people. If you haven't, I'm going to go through this all in depth right now. And for those that have, stick with me. There's a reason I'm going to go through this. So the hero's journey is kind of like the most famous storytelling pattern. Many stories are based on the hero's journey. And I'm going to tell you a quick version of a popular movie you've probably seen through the lens of the hero's journey. But it's been a while, so forgive me if I don't remember the details quite right. The story starts with bright lasers exploding against the blackness of space. An immense destroyer is in pursuit, and a masked figure dressed in black boards a smaller vessel. So this is the hook. The hook draws the viewer in. It makes them intrigued, so they keep watching. And then there's this boy living with his aunt and uncle on a remote planet. And this is the ordinary world. This is the place that the hero lives before the story starts. It's boring and it's in the name, it's ordinary. And then a wise bearded man comes to him and says, "You're a wizard, Luke." And he reveals that his father was also a wizard and was the best starship pilot he'd ever seen. He invites him to come with him to a faraway castle via a magic starship that's leaving from platform 9 3/4. So this is the call to adventure. This is asking the hero to leave the ordinary world and come fulfill his destiny. And the boy refuses, and he says, "I have to stay and help my aunt and uncle." And this is the refusal of the call. So this is the hero saying, "No, I'm not going to accept the call to adventure." And it usually has like a mundane, boring excuse attached to it. But then the boy finds out that there's this dark lord, this evil dark lord, Lord Voldemort, who's killed his aunt and uncle. So he accepts the invitation and he goes with the man. And this is the acceptance of the call. And so they take this magic starship to a castle, and this is the entry into the adventure world. The adventure world is a magical place that's way different from the ordinary world. And Luke, our hero, learns to use a magic wand and trains to become a Jedi. He has many adventures throughout the galaxy. And these are the tests and trials. Along the way, he meets new friends like Han Solo and Hermione, and he also meets enemies. But then he and his friends fly to the planet Alderaan, where they are confronted by a giant CGI dog who pulls them in with a tractor beam. And Luke and his friends use their skills to successfully free themselves from the tractor beam and rescue the trapped princess. So this is the ordeal. This is a big challenge that the hero has to face without his mentor, and he has to use his newly found skills and allies. And throughout these adventures, Luke has distinguished himself as a top Quidditch player and a growing wizard. And so in the Battle of the Death Star, he makes a direct hit that secures the Gryffindor victory against the forces of the Galactic Empire. And in the process, Luke also neutralizes the threat of Lord Voldemort, who murdered his aunt and uncle. And this is the climax, right? Traditional climax of the movie. It's the final battle. It's the final boss. It resolves the overall story arc that was set up at the beginning, right? It was set up at that call to adventure. So finally, Luke and his friends Han Solo, Ron, and Chewbacca return to the Rebel base, and they are awarded the House Cup by Princess Leia. And so Luke is now a wizard and forever changed. And this is the return to the ordinary world, right? This is the resolution of the story. It's the end of the story, right? He comes full circle, but he's changed as a person, as a character. So now I want to retell that story, but I'm going to rename it The Hacker's Journey. I am trying to make my own iPhone. Very good. So this is the hook. This is what I'm trying to do, right? I'm setting up the challenge. I was in a dimly lit barbecue joint here in China, and someone said, see all these cell phone parts in the markets? I wonder if you could build your own phone. Right, so call to adventure. Could you build your own phone? Should I try? I kept coming and going from China over the past 9 months, and I couldn't get rid of this burning question. Could I make my own cell phone? Would people even sell parts to a Western guy like me who hardly speaks any Chinese? So refusal of the call. Is this even possible? I kept coming and going. I didn't do anything. So I did what any geek would do, and I dove in with both feet. But then I decided to do it. So I'm going to give this a try. Coming to Shenzhen is like visiting the future, but it's this crazy, dystopian, Blade Runner-esque future. So now I'm entering the adventure world. I'm entering these incredibly bizarre cell phone electronics markets in Shenzhen. So to make a phone, I think I need 4 pieces. I need the metal back, the shell the phone sits in. I need a screen. I need a battery. And then I need the logic board, which is the circuit board that has the processor and the memory and things like that on it. So we're in a back alley behind the cell phone markets. I'm going to take a look at what's available here. Sometimes there are phone backs that are available for sale. Right, so I'm setting up the tests and trials, right? And the cool part about this from a hacker's journey perspective is you get to choose what the tests and trials are. And I don't actually have video of it here, but in the full video, I went down the road of trying to solder my own logic board, which is like thousands of parts and incredibly detailed and stuff. And that was a test that was too hard. So you really get to choose what your tests and trials are going to be and choose how hard they're going to be and sort of how you design the project and how you tell the story. I'm outside McDonald's and I'm waiting for Frank. So Frank's a buyer, buys a bunch of different Apple parts in the markets. He's going to help me buy the parts for to build a screen. Right. So Frank is my first ally that we meet in the story. He helped me with some translation and navigating the markets. We meet other people along the way. Helen becomes an ally as well. But we also meet enemies. She doesn't just have a phone that we can put this in to test with a display and battery.
Yeah, she doesn't have the time to do the testing.
Well, can we do the testing with her phone?
Yeah, she said no.
Yeah. So you could argue that she's an enemy. She's a barrier to success here. She's not particularly evil. She just really doesn't want to deal with us. You also could argue that in the hacker's journey, the project itself or the electronics or a particular bug becomes the enemy. It doesn't necessarily have to be a person. And then we go into the ordeal.
This logic board isn't perfect. Let me show you what I mean. If I go over here to the Compass app, and I turn it around, nothing happens. I'm going to try and take it back and see if she'll give me a new one. That was pretty amazing. I took the bad logic board back to the woman I bought it from, showed her on my testing setup that the compass didn't work. She said, okay, come back at 5. I asked her for a refund, and we paid me the money via her phone, and then said, still come back at 5 and I'll give you a new one.
So this is like my first major barrier in this project of like, I bought this logic board for a whole bunch of money and it doesn't work. And now I've had to use the skills and the allies that I've made along the way thus far to resolve this problem.
So today's the day I've been waiting for a long time.
And then we go into the climax.
Today is the day I get to try and put together the phone. I think I have everything I need. I'm not sure. So let's give it a shot.
Boy, those buttons look crappy.
Right, so this is the final showdown here.
I might have to go back to the market and put my mercy on one of the booth vendors and see if they can show me what I'm missing. I bought the cable from you yesterday, and if you feel like does not feel right.
没手感，没手感，为什么？
So he helps me, and I succeed here in building the phone, getting it to work.
Hey, that is sweet.
Oop. And then finally,
so today's the day I've been, and it turns out even
finally,
a newbie like me can figure out how to put
conclude
together
I've
a phone.
succeeded.
It's totally doable if you have access to parts, some basic tools, and some good advice or instructions on how to do it.
So this is kind of the conclusion, and you know, I'm showing that I've changed and that I've learned a bunch about how the insides of these phones work. I learned how to navigate the cell phone markets. I'm forever changed. So you are the hero of your own hacker's journey, your own maker's journey. So choose a good adventure. As I mentioned before, you get to choose your own challenges. So pick good ones, pick fun ones. Choose ones that are going to be challenging, but not too challenging. And the hero's journey plot points are well understood. There's a lot of books out there and writing and videos about them. They serve as an easy template to map your story onto. But don't feel like you have to adhere to them 100%. You can more use them as like a grab bag of things. Many of the plot points are optional, particularly at the length of video that you would make for like YouTube, right? The hero's journey, a lot of the writing out there is for feature films. This is a book that I really like, which is less of sort of a comprehensive text, and it's more individual plot points. It's got 195 what they call essential plot points that are not essential. If you're making a movie or you're writing a novel, but use as a grab bag as just a list of ideas. The ones that I went over are like the key ones that pretty much all sort of stories built on the hero's journey will adhere to. There's a bunch of stuff that's symbology and minor plot points that you can use or not use as you see fit. Let's talk about a different story structure. So let's talk about the 3-act story structure. This one's a bit more generic, sort of general use. So we have a setup. What's the story about? Where are we headed? We have some sort of conflict, right? For this audience, that conflict might be, how do I do this thing, right? And then the resolution, the conclusion. I'm going to change this act structure a little bit. Specifically for YouTube. So YouTube and online video platforms, I would say, have the problem that there's a lot of choice. As I talked about, there's 500 hours of video being uploaded to YouTube every day. So you really need that hook at the beginning to be salient, right? On YouTube, we talk about the first 15 to 30 seconds being really important to capture that person's attention, because if those first 15 to 30 seconds aren't interesting, they're just going to click off and watch something else. So we actually kind of as a rule, when we edit a Strange Parts video, and most of the creators that I knew do this, we look for the most interesting part of the video and then put that at the beginning. Like whether it's the success moment, whether it's a particular bad failure that's really interesting and kind of visually exciting, put that right at the beginning, and then we start the story. right? So then we go into it. We go from the hook, which might be as short as 3 seconds. It might be as long as 15 to 30 seconds. Then we go into an introduction. Okay, what is this video actually going to be about? Let me step back, give you more of an explanation. This is, what I'm trying to do. This is maybe a little bit of who I am, but we move pretty quickly into the story. And then the story is just kind of the natural progression of I'm building a thing, I'm visiting a place, whatever it is, right? It's kind of obvious from there. It should be obvious sort of how to progress through that. And then conclusion, right? Okay, let's wrap up, summarize. This is how I start my story planning. I don't usually write a full script. I might write out a script for like an introduction or a conclusion or something, but most of it's just kind of like bullet points. This is the script or the outline that I wrote for a video about trying to replace an iPhone battery and going around the markets and trying to find legitimate batteries and learning all about that. The things that I put in this, I start with how do I think this project is probably going to go before I have actually done much research or tackled it. Right. I do a little bit of research, so I have some idea of what I'm doing. But this is sort of like best case, what do I think is going to happen? And I'm paying particular attention to what parts do I think are going to be interesting to the audience? And what do I think is going to look good on camera? And then I'm also calling out, what are the risk points? Where do I think I might get stuck or I might have problems? And I think a lot of engineers, hackers, makers, when they think about like, what are my risk points in a project? Where am I going to get stuck? That's bad. That's not bad for video. And it's one of the things that makes this fun is problems are actually good because they help make the story better, right? They create that conflict. If you don't have problems, you don't have an interesting story, right? If it's only success, it leads to a boring story. And having problems makes your success moment that much more exciting. If the audience can see the journey you went on, the struggle you went on to get to the end, that end is so much better. As I mentioned this earlier, but like in the hacker's journey, the conflict is often between you and the project, not necessarily between you and other people, though it totally can be. This I'm going to show you a clip here from one of my videos. It's a low point. It was a low point for me personally in the project, and it worked really well in the finished story.
That's where I'm at. It fits together, but the screens are breaking. We've broken 2 screens in the past 24 hours. And they're just being too smashed, I think, by the headphone jack.
Turn your camera on when you least want to. I really, really didn't want to film that at the time. I was really upset. I was really tired of breaking screens. They were expensive. You won't want to be on camera when you have these moments. It sucks. But it's some of the most valuable footage you can capture for your story. However, it's also okay to reshoot. If you miss something, if the microphone was out of batteries, if the camera wasn't rolling, just reshoot it. If you didn't like what you said, if you stumbled over your words, reshoot it. Reshoot it as many times as it takes to get to something you like. Obviously, it's better to get the genuine reaction if you can. So you want to try and have your camera on when you think something interesting is about to happen. So like you're testing something for the first time, you're not sure if it's going to work or not. Those are the times to turn on your camera as well. Now, a lot of people, when they think about making videos, they say, but I don't want to show my face on camera. And I'm sure there are people in the audience that are thinking this right now. It's really, really worth it. Our brains are wired to look at faces. You can build so much more of an intimate relationship with your audience. You can get people emotionally involved if you show your face. It's totally worth it. I'm going to show you some of the very first footage I recorded as part of like trying to tell stories for real. Okay, so I'm here in Shenzhen. I've been living here
on and off for, so today I'm really excited to tell you about a new project I'm working on. I've been living in Shenzhen, but first, so today.
So that's pretty painful to watch. It was pretty painful at the time, but I got some great advice about this from of all people, the Padre on Screensavers. If anybody remembers the old Screensavers TV show, he said it gets easier after the first few hundred hours of being on camera. And at the time, I thought he was crazy. And since then, I've realized he's totally right. It does get easier. It's a learned skill like anything else. And the more you sit in front of a camera, the more you watch yourself back, the more natural it will seem, right? A lot of people say, I don't like the sound of my voice. That goes away. I didn't like the sound of my voice either when I first started watching it back. It just goes away. Like, you eventually just integrate the way it sounds when it comes out of your mouth with the way it sounds when you listen to it back. It's just practice. And no matter how awkward something is, you can keep reshooting it until you get it right.
I set out to make my own iPhone a couple of years ago. I set out to make my own iPhone a couple of years ago, and it took me down this crazy rabbit hole into the Chinese cell phone markets. And ever since, I set out to make my own iPhone a couple of years ago, and it took me down this crazy rabbit hole into the Chinese cell phone markets. And ever since, people have been asking me, okay, when are you going to build your own Android? But I kept saying I didn't want to make the same video again with cars behind me because this is driving me nuts. I set out, give up.
So that took me 45 takes or so to get right. That was an intro to the video of me trying to build my own Android phone a number of years later after building my own iPhone. Do it as many times as it takes. This is the only time anybody's seen publicly, like this talk is the only place you'll see any of those takes, right? The only people who have seen those takes are me and my editor. And when you're starting out, you're the only person that's going to see it. Don't worry about it. Another common question I get is, how long should a video be? And I don't love this question. My answer is as long as it needs to be, but not any longer. It's kind of the wrong question, but I'm going to answer it anyway. For YouTube, like 8 to 30 minutes, I think is a pretty good sweet spot. On other platforms, shorter. So whether that's Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, shorter. If you think about it, like if you think about your own behavior, you go to platforms like Netflix to watch TV show, a movie, that kind of length. You go to YouTube to watch things shorter. You go to TikTok to watch things that are really short. So be aware of what platform you're going to upload stuff to when it comes to length. But what's far more important than the length is the pacing. And for YouTube, for all online platforms, you need to keep the pacing tight. You need to be moving through the video quickly. You don't have the luxury of slowing down the way even like a feature film would. There's just too many other videos competing for people's attention. But the one time you should slow down is to emphasize like emotional moments in the story. When I was breaking those screens, like we slowed down the editing a lot so that emotional moment hits harder. I talked about this a little bit already, but in the first 30 seconds, you want to keep it really fast. You want to keep the editing fast paced. So like cut between shots every 2 to 3 seconds. You want it to be visually interesting. A thing I see a lot of people just getting started doing is intro animations. Don't do it, right? Don't have any sort of like intro animation to your channel, any of that. You're just going to lose people with it. Just don't do it. I know it's fun to play with motion graphics and all that. Don't do it. Just tell your story. So talking about pacing, cut out anything from your video that isn't required for the video to work, for the story to work. Trim down your dialogue, right? Anything that's like too long-winded, that's rambling, cut it out. I'm going to show you a rough edit that we did of a quick scene from a video about building a BattleBot for the TV show. And then I'm going to show you the same scene in a final edit where we really trimmed it for pacing. And as you're watching this, I want you to feel yourself getting bored. And this is actually a tool we use in the edit room and that top editors use. Feel how it feels to watch this.
All right, so we got our parts from Sencut Send. We got aluminum parts the other day, so that'll be good for wheels and molding. This should be the frame parts. Ooh, that's the base belly pan.
Okay. We got our parts in from our sponsor, Sencut Send. We've got 2 different materials. We've got parts cut in aluminum. We've got parts cut in steel. They were all laser cut. When we designed all of these, they're all based on a flat pattern that just gets cut out in a profile out of a big sheet. We bring them in here, we unwrap them all. A lot of them have notches and tabs that all interlock with each other. Once we tab them all together, we weld them up, and everything is just a really good fit right out of the packaging. This is our front and back wedge. We'll be grinding a small taper on the front and back just to kind of help get underneath our opponents and also just protect the front from hits. These parts here are going to get stacked up and form the hubs of our wheels.
So I think one of the things about this, right, like there's not much burr on either side. There's not much draft angle on the edges. It's going to make it really easy, especially when we start talking about, like, if you look at these little edge tabs that are going to tap together.
So boring.
That being so square into the corner is going to allow for laying a weld beam.
I'm going to make you suffer a little bit longer. Now we're unpacking boxes. So boring. Okay, so my rule of thumb when going from an edit like this down to a final edit is cut it in half. Right? Try and make the time half as long without hurting the story or without breaking the story. And then when you cut it in half, start over again and try and cut it in half again. And keep doing that until you literally can't cut anything more without destroying the story, without getting to the point that the story just doesn't work anymore because it doesn't make sense. The other thing that I would say is show, don't tell. We're in this particular clip, there's a lot of like, well, we're going to use this part for this. We're going to grind this down, right? This is going to be used for wheels. Show, don't tell. So what we did is we cut a lot of that, and because we were going to show it later, right? We just made sure that we showed people doing all of the things that are being talked about here, and then you can explain it in the moment. Why are we doing this? So this is the final cut now.
All right, so we got our parts from Sencut Send. We got aluminum parts the other day, so that'll be good for wheels and molding. This should be the frame parts.
They were all laser cut. They're all based on a flat pattern that just gets cut out in a profile out of a big sheet. A lot of them have notches and tabs that all interlock with each other. Once we tab them all together, we weld them up, and everything is just a really good fit right out of the packaging. So this is the base, this is the bottom.
Skip the box.
These are the wheel wells.
Now we're showing how is this robot going to fit together? So much, much tighter, right? And really just jump into the action now. Next, I want to talk about more of the mechanics of actually making the video. And I specifically want to talk about the finer points of editing. Again, I'm not going to talk about the technicals of the software. I'm just going to talk about the techniques from a storytelling perspective. So editing, the way I think about editing is playing with time. We can shrink down or remove sections of time that are going too slowly. And I would say that that's one of the most important features of editing. There's a quote from the famous mathematician Blaise Pascal that he wrote in a letter. I have made this longer than usual because I have not had the time to make it shorter. Don't do that to your audience, right? Don't make your audience suffer through something that's too long because you were too lazy to do the work to edit it down to make it shorter. So I'm going to show you a couple techniques here for changing time. So one of the important things when you're making things is like you need to be able to show the passage of time, that you spent a lot of time on something without making the viewer suffer through it. So you can use a time lapse like this. We put a little bit of sort of effects magic on top. You can speed up and slow down during time lapses. You can do music montages like this. So this is a bunch of different shots just cut together, cut to the music beat. You can use fades to black to show a passage, to show the end of a day and start of a new day. So you'll see there's a fade to black here, and then we come back up in the next scene.
First step,
and now this is the next day, right?
Get this running
intuitively knows, okay, things have changed.
See if we can
get
use
montages
like a motorcycle taxi
to travel from one location to another.
Because we're in
going
District
from one
1 and
to
it's in
another
District
market.
4, which is like kilometers away from here.
Right, so we're just showing montage of us on motorbikes showing that we're changing location.
I'm not sure this is the safest way. Good.
You can also, I like to weave in shots of everyday life to show changes between locations. So I'm here at the Tool Brothers. Now we're showing a street scene.
This
and now I'm in a
high
different market.
temperature.
This
High
works
temperature.
particularly well.
Okay.
in Shenzhen. You can do fast cuts like this to show a sequence. We're using a little bit of sound effect magic on top, but there's no music.
All right, I'm gonna do.
The other thing you can do is use B-roll. So B-roll is any video like this that doesn't have dialogue inherently in it. So we're laying that clip of me throwing something in the bin on top of the dialogue.
Which is much easier to repair in the pits.
This is a jump cut. So let me play that again.
Which is much easier to repair.
The jump cut's right
We can weld
here.
steel.
It's something that's traditionally frowned upon in like TV and movies. They don't do it. It's much more accepted on YouTube. You can do it. Audiences usually don't mind or complain, but you can also hide it in a couple different ways. So you can throw B-roll on top of this. Like we could cut to a close-up of him pointing at the metal to use that to show that we're to hide the cut between the two clips. You can use two different camera angles. So, if we had a second camera set up, we could switch from one camera angle to the next camera angle. But the cheap and dirty way to do this is to just punch in, to literally just zoom in across the cut. And it looks like this.
Which is much easier to repair in the pits. But in order to get a good weld.
Same shot, right? Same shot. We just punched in a bit. Feels like a different shot. Like bothers you less as a viewer. When we talk about manipulating time, we can also slow time down. So this is a slow-mo shot of a printer head on a UV printer. We were doing a factory tour. So just something to keep in mind of like you can expand and contract time in both directions. You can also reorder time. So think about like flashbacks, flashing back to like how naive you were when you started the project, when you're at your darkest moment. You can also flash forward. Right. So using narration, like narrate, little did I know at the time that this was going to be a problem kind of thing. You can also interleave different storylines, right? So if you've got, maybe you're working on a piece of electronics and you're working on something mechanical, you can interleave those even if they weren't shot in that order, right? And that helps keep the viewer interested, right? If you go back and forth between two storylines, you see this a lot in television. So that's what I've got. If there's anything that you take away from my talk, I'd like you to take this away, that stories follow patterns. You don't have to invent it from scratch. Even the best storytellers out there are following patterns that exist. They're written down. There's tons of information about them. You don't have to start from scratch. And that those patterns are similar to the patterns that you know in engineering, right? They're same as like software patterns or electrical engineering design patterns, right? And anybody can learn these patterns and follow them. You don't have to be a magical creative person. Thank you. So I know we're probably late on time. Do I have time for questions? You're the last talk. Oh, cool. So okay. Okay. Dylan's going to pass around the microphone. Awesome.
Yeah, seriously, guys, take your time. Okay. I have someone coming in for a sound check, but he's awesome.
Sweet. Awesome. Oh, sweet. Thank you. These are ways to find me online. We have a really fun Discord community, so that's the invite link there. So yeah, any questions? Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting. Can you talk a little bit about monetization? And
sure.
I'm sure you don't want to share actual numbers, but just for people or for all of us to understand, since you talked about the difference of doing it as a side job versus actually becoming full time.
Yep.
If you have 1 million views on a video, is that enough to quit your job, or
sure?
You would know more about that.
So let me just quickly kind of list typical sources of money for people, because I think it's there are more options than I think most people think about. So the obvious one that everybody knows of is ad revenue on YouTube. They share, I think we get 55% of the top line ad revenue. In the past, that was enough to survive on, if you were doing enough views. I think for a lot of people now, they need to supplement that with other income. Which is definitely the case for me. My videos are pretty expensive to make, as you might imagine, with breaking iPhone parts and stuff. The main source of revenue outside of that is sponsors. And So to give you some sense of numbers, like $4 per 1,000 views would be like kind of a middle of the road number for videos on YouTube. It really depends on who your audience is and what your subject matter is. If your audience is all Americans and you're talking about personal investment, your revenue is going to be way, way higher. If your audience is in India and you're talking about something that advertisers don't want to bid on, your revenue is going to be much lower. Sponsors, like, again, it really depends who your audience is, what you're talking about, who the sponsor is. But like a number that gets tossed around sometimes is like $20 per 1,000 views for a sponsor. Again, like the numbers vary really widely. Other sources of revenue, Patreon. Everybody's probably familiar with that. Selling things, whether it be like traditional merch, like t-shirts and hoodies and things like that, or if it's more like customized products, right? I know people who run very successful like e-commerce businesses with real functional products, tools, supplies, whatever, that, you know, their YouTube channel really is just the marketing for that. And I alluded a little bit at the beginning. That was like my original goal with this, and I still haven't gotten there. It's still a goal, but I have taken a detour through more of the traditional content creator means. Donations from the community. So like people live stream and get donations from whether it be Twitch or TikTok or things like that. I'm probably forgetting like 4 other things. Speaking can be one. Yeah, that's kind of like the big ones. There's probably 4 other things I'm forgetting, but in some sense, you kind of alluded to like how many views do you need to be getting to do this full time, and it really depends. There are some people who get almost. I know a guy. Maybe I shouldn't say what industry he's in, but it's something technical. His YouTube channel is very small. Like he gets single-digit thousands of views per video, but it's all around a niche technical topic where he's selling something that's worth quite a lot of money, like in the like 5 figures range. And he's built a multi-million-dollar business off of that number of views, right? He has maybe 10,000 subscribers, right? Whereas like I know other people who like didn't go full time till they were in the kind of hundreds of thousands of views per video. So yeah, really depends. What I would say is that if you can find a good niche where you're really helping influence somebody's buying decision, that it's much easier to go full time at a much earlier, smaller stage. So, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, just check this way. Yeah, I was curious if you had any projects that you set out on and then kind of realized maybe this was a little too much, and like how you overcome that failure, like and what you do with that. How can you turn it around, or if you just had to kind of abandon ship?
Yes, absolutely. This hits like near and dear to my heart. I'm working on 2 big iPhone projects right now that are like I'm absolutely stuck on. I don't have a perfect answer here. I tend to like overinvest in hard projects and spend more time than I should. It's probably like the number one source of challenge for me is running this as a business, is being too attached as an engineer to like get things done. The flip side is I definitely have made videos that are just failure videos, right? They're like, they follow the hero's journey and then at the end, the hero fails. And it works okay. It doesn't work as well as a success video. I think one of the hard things with that, and that I still wrestle with, is it's hard to identify a final failure, right? Like I've never really gotten to the point on an engineering project where I felt like I couldn't go further. And so it always feels like the failure is giving up, rather than like definitively being able to say this is not possible. And so that's always what I struggle with as sort of a very engineering minded storyteller. Yeah, it's a challenge. Yeah. There's a lot up.
Great presentation. Thank you so much. For an engineer embracing more of this creative side, would you recommend if they were obviously it always depends, but like if you had to pick one or the other, like creating one video worth 100 videos or creating 100 videos and focusing on the iteration?
Great question. The conventional advice, the old school advice is create 100 videos. I think it's totally wrong. I really think you should invest in one video. But I'm biased because it's what worked for me. I spent 5 months of full-time work on that first iPhone video, and it went crazy viral, right? But it's survivorship bias, right? If I'd been in a different place at a different time with a different project, would it have worked that way? I don't know. What I will say is that I think when you're in the mindset of creating 100 videos, so the argument for 100 videos is you need the practice. And so you should make 100 videos that are crap and eventually you'll get good at it. I don't think that's the right approach to practice, right? Because it's basically saying like you just do the same thing over and over again and eventually you'll get good. I think the practice part is right, but I think you need to practice getting better. And so I would say work on fewer videos and iterate within that video. So the final video for that iPhone project, like I shot 100 hours of video for that. It's 23 minutes long. A lot of that was like reshot stuff, right? I spent days in the markets walking around with a cell phone trying to get the shots that I needed. And like I got better at it as the more I worked on it. I also like almost all the dialogue in that has been reshot multiple times. Because it didn't have good audio. I didn't know what I was saying. It was too long-winded. Like I redid a lot of stuff. And I think that part of practice and iteration is really valuable and undervalued particularly in the like conventional wisdom around how to create a YouTube channel, right? Yeah, that would be my advice. So that being said, like maybe not one, but like maybe 5, right? Like there is a middle ground there, right? I wouldn't necessarily say that you should spend 5 months making a video, but like spend a month making a video, kind of thing, right? And then see how the audience reacts. I was lucky that I had a lot of people around me who gave me really valuable feedback during that process. So it was almost as though I made several videos in that time. Any other questions?
We could do one more, and you guys are more than welcome to hang out for sure. And you can chat with Scotty after this. Yeah. Actually, just big round of applause for Scotty. Thank you so much. And I would stick around, but we have our final keynote of the night over in the next room. I highly recommend it. Scotty. We have Robin Fink from 9 Inch Nails and his business partner, Corey Davis. They're talking about their new game company, Eyes Out. Should be a lot of fun.
Awesome.
He's pretty creative in how he does his presentations. So, but I'll hand it over here. Yeah, but you guys can totally mingle and
I'm happy to hang out as long as people want to. So.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about the value of high production quality versus content.
Sure.
Yeah. So, I would imagine that content leads. Like if it's a good story, it doesn't matter so much if it's the lighting's perfect or the audio's perfect. So
totally.
How much, will you then delay posting it until the audio's perfect, or will you just be like, what, the story's there and let's just get it out?
Yeah. So you said both of the answers in your question. So the first answer is like content wins. If you have a great story, but your technicals aren't perfect, your quality isn't perfect, it's much less important. The exception to that is audio. If you have bad audio, nobody's going to watch it. So if you're going to invest in video quality, actually, like don't invest in your camera, invest in your audio gear. So whether that's like an external mic, the answer is an external mic, right? That's the answer. And focus on that first. I produced that first video with a point and shoot camera and a little like $100 Zoom H1 audio recorder. And I borrowed a friend's like camcorder as a second cam for a little bit of it. And then an iPhone like 6 or 6S was what I shot with in the markets. So like it wasn't particularly high-end gear. I obviously have a lot more high-end gear now, but I wouldn't say that it's like particularly integral to my success.
And so again, just as long as they can hear you, your voice doesn't have to be mellifluous. They can just understand what you're saying.
Yeah. So just to repeat that, I'm not sure everybody heard you. Like the audio needs to be intelligible. Yes. You don't have to have the perfect, radio voice or whatever it is. It really is just like, I would say the thing with audio is that people need to not notice it. So you need to not have bad audio to the point that people are annoyed by it. So that's kind of the bar. The people shouldn't be thinking about your audio. If you can get to that point, then everything on top is gravy. Yeah, we don't spend a ton of time. Like I have an external Rode shotgun mic on top of my main camera usually. Usually that's fine. Just plugs in via the mic jack. Like I said, I've used a $100 audio recorder in the past. In factories, we use lav mics just because they're so loud that we really fight against the machine noise. And then in post, like most of what we're doing is just trying to like make sure the levels are good so that the music matches the volume of the dialogue and things like that. We're not doing anything super crazy. Sometimes with factories, we get crazy from a noise reduction perspective just because the machines are so loud and like we can't ask them to turn them off. But yeah, it's not anything super wild. It's not what you would see in like music production or something like that. And I would say like, I mean, I kind of alluded to it, but I never said it. Shoot on your phone to start with, and phones have great mics. So often that's enough. But you can get like an external lavalier mic that clips onto your shirt for your phone. Or Rode's got these great like Bluetooth wireless mics that clip onto your shirt. They're a little box. So you don't have to spend a ton of money to make your audio good. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.